into the mortgage market, while the pension-backed mortgage plan is expected to offer significant relief to aspiring homeowners. In an interview with Jose Akili, the Group CEO of the County Pension Fund Services Limited, this presents a ripe opportunity to drive the country's Big Four agenda. Jose was speaking at the CPF's annual general meeting held in Nairobi on Wednesday, where the fund disclosed plans to further scale up its offerings in the market to tap the undertapped pensions sector.
Combined fund value of the three schemes actually goes beyond 60 billion, and the membership goes to almost 100,000 across all the county governments of Kenya. Our desire is to grow to be one of the largest pension systems in Kenya and to manage employee benefits in the public sector and the private sector so that we can be the premier organization to go to for anybody who wants to enjoy a better retirement after working.
Still staying with matters retirement, well, my colleague Noah Kipkemboi did an insightful interview with the CEO of the Retirement Benefits Authority, Nzomo Mutuku, and now has more on this.
Well, we've been told that the earliest time to start saving for the future is yesterday, even not today. And for majority of us, especially if you're in sort of form of an employment, be it self-employment or employed by a particular company, it's very imperative for you to save for your retirement. So for the past 20 years, the RBA Retirement Benefits Authority has been regulating the pension sector in the country. What has been achieved thus far? What led to those changes? And what is the future of the pension industry in Kenya? Right now, I'm joined by RBA CEO, Dr. Nzomo Mutuku. Thank you very much for joining us, sir. So for the 20 years, what would you say are some of the remarkable changes we've seen in the pension industry in Kenya?
Thank you very much. When we came back 20 years ago, we used to describe pension industry as the wild, wild west because it was unregulated. There were a lot of wrongs which were going on. People did not have confidence in saving for retirement because they were not sure that they would get their money down the line, maybe after 30, 40 years when they retire. So there are a lot of issues which forced the government to move towards setting up a regulatory framework for pensions. So the Act was actually passed in 1997. It created RBA, but RBA came into operation in 2000. And RBA was given very clear mandate. One, to protect the members of schemes so that people would have confidence if they save, they are going to get their money. Two, to regulate and supervise the industry, the schemes and the service providers, so that everything is streamlined. Three, to develop the industry so that more people save for retirement and join schemes. Four, to advise the government on policy issues, which we do through research and giving policy advice based on the research that we have done. And lastly, of course, to support government in its development agenda, the Vision 2030 and so on, which were there. So from that start, over time, we were able to put a lot of rules and regulations for the industry. These rules and regulations ensure that schemes were well run. We put checks and balances. So for example, a scheme has different players. We have the trustees who are the people in charge who make the decisions, but they have to use a separate person to do the investments, who we call the fund manager. They have to use another separate person to hold the assets, who we call the custodian. And they have to use yet another separate person to do the record keeping and so on, who we call the administration. So that brings a check and balance. No one person has control. You know, then the fund manager is saying invest here, but the money is not with him. It's with the custodian, who is the one who is going to move the money to the investment. So, you know, and on top of all these people, there is us, RBA, who are overseeing and supervising to make sure that everything goes right. So because of bringing that, we really were able to streamline the industry. And then you have seen now tremendous growth. From that time, we had less than 100 billion in pension assets. Now we're at 1.4 trillion. That time, only 13% of the labor force were in any kind of scheme, mainly the NSSF. But now we have 22% of the labor force in schemes. And we have so many different types of schemes now. You know, we have individual schemes, we have umbrella schemes, we have pension schemes, provident funds, all kinds of schemes. So it has been a great process. Maybe just to add that over time we've also introduced a lot of very exciting and interesting innovations which have really improved our industry. You know, if I go right back to the beginning, we never used to have what we call individual pension plans, which are open to anybody. We mainly had schemes which were created by employers for their staff. But we bought individual pension plans which anybody can join. And that has really helped us to drive coverage because they're open to anybody, including even those in the informal sector.
You've mentioned, you know, the change, especially the scope. People are coming into the pension sector in regards to participants, increasing 20 years ago at 10% of the labor force to now close to 22%, which is quite a leap. I mean, what will you say is the reason why we are having sort of slow uptake of this idea of, you know, taking up and pay, you know, having pension for yourself?
The reason that coverage is low relatively is because in Kenya most of the labor force is in the informal sector. You find most of the formal sector people are in one kind of scheme or the other, but the informal sector people are not in schemes. And that is because traditionally pension schemes were perceived as being something for formal sector. But now we have moved away from that kind of thinking, and now we have pension schemes which are actually targeting the informal sector. We talked of Mbao scheme, which targets Juakali workers. We have a Habana Haba scheme, we have Mobikeza scheme, we have a pension scheme. So we have got a number of schemes which are specifically targeting the informal sector. Now the challenge was that the traditional schemes used to rely on payrolls, bank accounts, and those kind of structures. But the new schemes that we have, they are all mobile phone based. So people can join schemes on the phone, can contribute on the phone. They even attend meetings on the phone, get statements on the phone. Even eventually they'll get their benefits through the phone. So that is what is now bringing this segment, which was traditionally excluded, they are now being able to be brought on board the pension system.
Utilizing technology to bring people now looking at where we stand in terms of pension in the country. You mentioned the assets have really grown, yeah, from less than 100 billion 20 years ago to 1.4 trillion. I mean, that is a huge amount, but let's look at the potential that we hold locally. What is the potential of the insurance sector, especially to support the greater economy?
Of course, this 1.4 trillion is actually invested in the economy. You know, we have investments in quoted shares in the stock exchange. We have investments in real estate property. If you walk in town and look at the buildings in town or around Nairobi or other cities, a lot of them are owned by pension schemes. You know, the new CBK Towers, which has just come up, is owned by the CBK pension scheme. Teleposta Towers owned by Teleposta scheme. Barclays Plaza is owned by Barclays scheme, and so on. And also not just office buildings, but even malls, residential estates owned by pension schemes. And then they also invest in, you know, what we call the real sector. So, for example, they invest in companies, either through the stock exchange or through private equity or through bonds that the companies have issued. They invest in government securities. We are the biggest investors in government infrastructure bonds, for example, which are used to finance infrastructure investments. So the money is very much in the economy. The new area that we now want to put some more focus is infrastructure investment. So we have created a new asset class for infrastructure, and we are looking forward to pension schemes going there more direct into infrastructure investments.
And we can't ignore the current times that we live under right now. Over the past 1 year, a pandemic hit the world and every sector was impacted. When you talk about the local pension industry, how was it hit by COVID-19 pandemic?
Of course, the industry was hit by COVID. 3 main ways or 4 main ways. One, some of our members who are in schemes lost their jobs because they were retrenched, because the companies had closed. And when they lost their jobs, that gave them, they could come and get some of the money out of the pension scheme, because we do allow you to get some of your money when you lose your job. So they came and took the money out of the system. Other employers, they didn't retrench, but they may have sent their staff on lower salaries, which means lower pension contribution, or unpaid leave, so there was no contribution, or they had to suspend contributions because of the challenges they were having. So that was the second shock. The third shock, of course, was the investment side. Like I said, you have invested in the economy, so if the economy is doing badly, obviously we are also going to feel the effect. And then we also had a challenge of compliance. Some of the requirements we had were hard to implement that time. For example, having an annual general meeting, you cannot do it because you cannot have meetings. Even submission of some accounts and so on. There were challenges because of the restriction. But the good news is that the industry has proved to be very resilient. 2020, despite all those challenges, we still saw growth from 1.2 trillion to 1.4 trillion. Schemes have found ways around those challenges. So now we have AGMs which are online, which are on TV, which are on phones, and so on. So we have been able to overcome the challenges, and we have bounced back very strongly.
Definitely. Acclimatizing is the key word there. You change with the times. And, you've mentioned the impact in regards to contribution and also the investment side. Is there, as much as we noted an increase in the year 2020, right now, in terms of recovery, the country is talking about recovery for the pension sector in the country. How's that recovery coming about, and is there any numbers to back that up?
For the schemes that stopped contributions or suspended for periods of time, we had around 90 schemes which had to suspend because the employers had maybe closed or they were having minimum operations and so on. But that is out of a total base of 1,250 schemes. So it's not so significant, but it's quite a number. But a lot of those have now come back with a pickup in the economy and so on. Some sectors like schools, for example, which are closed, they have now reopened. So the schools are back. We had hospitals who at that time were not having business, but now they are back in business. So we have seen a lot of pickup. But there are still some sectors, of course, which are still struggling. The hotels, the tourist hotels. I think the local business hotels are okay and they've come back, but the tourist hotels, many of them are not even reopened at all, so they are still on suspension of contributions. Airlines, so those sectors which rely a lot on tourists, those ones are still suffering. But the other sectors, we have seen them bouncing back.
Definitely recovering.
All right. Very interesting insights coming out of that particular interview. Well, that's where we want to wrap it up on the show. My name is Abi Gina. We'll be keeping you posted on developments on the rally from Naivasha.